Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Em, and this is a video I did not foresee myself ever making, but I read 31 nonfiction books in 2024, so it feels like I need to tell you which ones were the best and which ones I would 100% recommend with my whole chest. So here we are. These are my top 10 nonfiction books of 2024. All right, these are in no particular order. I did not number these. I just wrote down the 10 that are my favorites. And though honestly, pretty much all of my nonfiction this year was fairly highly rated. I think I gave pretty much everything between a 4 and a 5. I think I maybe had like one that was a 2-star, and that just came down to personal taste, not necessarily to content or style or execution. But yeah, let's just get into it because I am really excited to talk to you about all these books. So we're going to start off with Yale Needs Women. This was an audiobook that I read for Wheel of Doom. Forget which episode, but it was in the fall. And this is a history book about 1969, I believe, 1970, when Yale first started admitting women into their student body. And I found this so interesting because doesn't that seem so late for Yale to have been like an all-boys school? I feel like that's so late when so many other Ivy League schools started admitting women a lot earlier. So Yale was definitely like the last holdout in letting women in. And the author picked a few women to focus on specifically, though it was like a very broad history, but we did have these 3 or 4 or 5 touchstones to come back to get a really personal perspective on what it was like to be one of, I think it was only 200 women out of 1,000 men at Yale in those first couple of years. And the juxtaposition of how liberal Yale was in its politics and in its student body and in the things that students were protesting against, and in like desegregating the school, like admitting Black students, but then how dug in their heels the administration was about admitting women. And this was infuriating, frustrating, interesting, engaging. I just highly enjoyed it. I do recommend it on audio. I thought the narrator did a really good job, and it's a quick read. I believe it was like a 5-hour audiobook. I mean, I read it in one day, which is not my normal. I usually am slow down, take my time with nonfiction, but I just blasted through this because it was so engaging and it was so well written. All right, this one I read way earlier in the year, so my memory is really fuzzy about this book. So we're gonna go based on what I remember, which isn't a lot. But next up is Lady Killers, and this is a history of female serial killers throughout history, and each chapter focuses on a different woman, and you get her life story, basically. Who she was, how she was raised, what her life was like, and what were the circumstances that led her to becoming a serial killer. And it was really fun. It was really engaging. The chapters did start to feel a little repetitive after a while, more so because women serial killers, they really like arsenic, is what I learned in this book. This book does stop in the 1950s because getting into more contemporary serial killers is a little bit like weirder. So she wanted it to stay very much like a history book and not a contemporary like true crime type of book. Again, I really liked this. I thought this was really interesting. It was really fun. It was really engaging. The audiobook is really good. And I am just not fascinated, but you know, when the author is going down and describing these women's lives and the circumstances that led them to committing their first murder, you know, I didn't think that they were necessarily wrong in the choices that they made because, what's the saying? I support women's rights and women's wrongs. All right, this one might be a familiar one because I feel like I've talked about it a lot in the last few months. But next up is Clever Girl by Hannah McGregor. This is a little essay, a little micro book in which Hannah McGregor proposes the theory that the movie Jurassic Park is a classic queer feminist text. And then she proceeds to convince you that she's right. And I believe her. She is right. I loved this so much. This had so many fun things to say. I have a real deep love for the movie Jurassic Park. It came out when I was 8 or 9, and so it's a movie that was in my childhood a lot and that I've continued to come back to and rewatch as an adult. We've watched it with the kids a lot because the kids really like it too, and my husband is a big fan of the movie as well. So I have a lot of familiarity and a lot of affection for the movie, and it was really nice to read this from somebody else who also has a lot of affection for the movie and just the things that the movie is saying that the movie doesn't know it's saying about queerness and about feminism. And so yeah, I would highly recommend it if you like any of the things that I just talked about. It is super short. It's only like 110 pages and it's in this itty bitty book. This is part of the Pop Classics series, and this is definitely a series I am going to explore more of because like some of the other pop culture things that there are essays about are like Showgirls, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, My So-Called Life, Bachelor, Calvin and Hobbes, Dirty Dancing, like all pop culture things that I have a relationship with, and I'm really interested in like whatever the weird deep dive is within those things. Highly recommend if you just want a short, sweet little nonfiction time. And then kind of along a similar vein, I also really loved Disney High, and this is the history of the Disney Channel from its inception and then through like the 20-teens. And so it covers the creation, development of Disney Channel as an entity, and then getting into the early days of Disney Channel TV shows, Disney Channel original movies, and how those different things helped propel people's careers. So like we get a chapter about Hilary Duff because obviously Hilary Duff has a career because of Lizzie McGuire. And we also get into Demi Lovato coming off of, is it Camp Rock? That's kind of where I aged. I stopped consuming Disney Channel because I was like a full ass adult in the 2010s. So obviously like I just kind of stopped consuming it for a while. I definitely loved the earlier bit more because that was the era of Disney Channel that I was the most familiar with. And as we got into like Wizards of Waverly Place and whatever the one that's set in a hotel and Camp Rock, like I was not consuming Disney Channel things at that time. And so I still found it interesting because I just didn't know anything about those entities, but it wasn't as nostalgic for me as like the first part of it was. But I highly recommend it. It was so good. Again, really engaging, really well written. Audiobook is great. And I felt like it was really well researched and just great if you like books about pop culture, about media, about film or television. Like one of the best examples, I think, of that type of nonfiction. All right, we're gonna go in a totally different direction now, so buckle up. Next one we're gonna talk about briefly is Christians Against Christianity. I read this back in January, so again, it's been a long time. So we're really gonna be talking about the impressions that it left, more so than specific content. But this is written by a man who, is he a deacon in his church? He's like the hierarchy of church personnel. He's up there, close to the top. He's been a Christian for a long time. He's been involved in the church for a long time. He is like an expert in Christianity, as much as you can have an expert in Christianity. No, there are experts in Christianity. Never mind. Anyways, he's an expert. He knows what he's talking about. And he is basically setting up the argument for how white, Republican, evangelical Christians are not portraying Christianity the way it is meant to be practiced, and that the things that they say are antithetical to the teachings in the Bible. And he goes chapter by chapter. Each chapter is a different topic, a different culture war, a different hot take that this new like American evangelical movement has, and he takes it apart and discusses why this does not line up with the core values and beliefs of Christianity, and how a belief that he loves and believes in himself is being twisted for corruption. And it was very cathartic to read. Last year, I might reread it again this January. I might need that reinforcement that this is not like the way Christianity is weaponized, is not how it's meant to be used. So I might need to reread it in 2025 as a reminder, but it was reassuring that, because I think sometimes in watching the news and the media, it can feel like this is all Christians, like what we see in the news and what we hear people saying about everything, that is what all Christians believe. And I know that's not true. So it was really nice to read this book and have the reminder of that this is the people that are saying these horrible, hateful things and are hiding behind the wall of their religion, that they are wrong, and that is not the way that religion should be used. I hope that all made sense. I'm not religious myself. I was raised fairly agnostic. My parents we didn't go to church, so I wasn't raised with a steadfast belief system. And I spent a lot of years in my later teens and my early 20s and even into my 30s a little bit, really trying to turn myself into a person who believes in religion. And finally, after my youngest was born, realized that I was trying to shove a square peg into a round hole, and it just wasn't working for me. So I have a lot of experience being adjacent to religion, but I've definitely always been an outsider and watching how people talk about religion and always being so bewildered that the things some people say don't match up with what they say their belief systems are. And the hypocrisy, I think it's the hypocrisy that has always really gotten to me, and that's really what kept me from being able to sink myself into a belief system, because I just saw for so long how hypocritical people are about stuff like that. So I don't know how this would hit if you are a religious person. I would hope it would be reassuring to read from somebody else that faith can be soft and can be loving and can be inviting and isn't supposed to be hateful. But I don't know. I do recommend it though, regardless of where you are on the belief scale, because I think what he has to say is definitely worth listening to. Highly recommend, even if it's a very tricky book for me to talk about. All right, we're swinging in another direction again. Next up, we are going to talk about Girly Drinks. This is a world history of women and alcohol. So this starts in Mesopotamia, basically, and then goes through to present day about the role women have played in the production and manufacturing and selling of alcohol, and how women have been kicked out of that space and are trying to pull themselves back into this space. And if you read this book, you get to learn about the invention of the patriarchy, which is not great, but it's there. And I loved this so much. I have a really good friend who owns a brewery with his husband, and I got this because he had like an adult book fair at his brewery, which was like awesome, and he should do it again. But I got this because I was just interested in, obviously he's not a woman, but I just thought it was interesting what an active role women have always had, because that's, I don't think, what you think of, because I think patriarchy has done such a good job of shoving women out of those spaces. But I thought this was really interesting and very well researched, and listening to this on audio was like listening to a long podcast. So I definitely recommend this on audio. Audio is my favorite way to consume nonfiction, because if it's done right, it feels like listening to a long podcast, and that is my favorite type of nonfiction. Every book I've talked about, I listen to on audio at least a little bit, except for Christians Against Christianity. That one I just read with my eyeballs, but everything else that I've talked about and everything else that I'm going to talk about, I listen to on audio for at least part of my reading experience, if not all of my reading experience. But yeah, if you're interested in alcohol, I mean, I'm not really interested in alcohol. I consume it socially, occasionally. I'm actually not drinking alcohol anymore, and I'm probably not going to be for a while, just because I'm getting to that age where I don't really like how I feel when I drink alcohol. Thanks, 40. That's awesome. Love that for me. Again, history about women I find fascinating, and I think this is a branch of history of women throughout the world that we don't talk about very much. And this does do like world history. You go to different places throughout the world to find out what their history with alcohol is and the role women have played or been pushed out of in those different countries. All right, you've probably seen this book before because I think this one has been on a lot of best of lists, but I read Doppelganger also earlier this year. And oh man, this one was also one I read a long time ago. In this one, the author, Naomi Klein, is talking about our internet self versus our real life self. And the starting off point for this book is that there is Naomi Klein, that's the author of this book. She's a journalist. She's a writer. She's been around for a while. And then there is another Naomi Klein who is on the internet, who is like anti-vax, RFK Jr. super fan, like that kind of personality. And how disorienting it is for author Naomi Klein to exist in the same world as the other Naomi Klein and how often they are confused. It was really cool. I also really love books about the internet and about how the internet is affecting our culture and our brains and the way we interact with each other. And I thought this was very thought-provoking along that concept. So again, I mean, I recommend all of these, but like if you also are interested in how the internet is kind of warping our brains, definitely recommend this. I'm getting a little bit of whiplash. Maybe I should have organized these by type instead of just like swinging back and forth, because the next one we're going to talk about is Raw Dog, which is about the history of the hot dog in the United States. Oh, okay. This is great. In this book, the author, I totally forgot her name, but you'll see it on the book cover. She starts off by giving you a little bit of info about how hot dogs are made. I do recommend skipping that part. And then she also tells you the 5 best places in the US to get the best hot dog for the least amount of money. Costco is, of course, in that list. I won't tell you what the other ones are. I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, you get that information. And then the rest of the book is her chronicling a road trip that she went on in the summer of 2021 across the United States, trying hot dogs at these iconic, small, family-owned hot dog restaurants across the country. And my favorite chapter was like kind of in the middle when she is in New York for the 4th of July and goes to the National Hot Dog Eating Competition and tells you about the history of the hot dog competition, the competitors who do it, what it's like to compete as like a hot dog for food eating competitions, like what those athletes, how they have to train, what it does to their bodies. Like absolutely fascinating, by far my favorite part. This was funny, this was a little bit vulgar, it was a really catchy writing, like it just sucked me in from the get-go, and I was at my most obnoxious when I was reading this and reading out loud parts that I found absolutely hilarious to anyone within earshot. Thanks to my family for putting up with me during that time. But like this book just took over my entire personality while I was reading it and for a good little bit afterwards. It took me a while to come down off the hot dog high, if I'm being honest. All right, we're gonna do one more political book. This one I talked about fairly recently because I read it in November. This is Democracy Awakening: Notes on the State of America by Heather Cox Richardson. And this is history of the United States political system and how we got to where we are now as a country and in this particular political environment. I found this really informative. I found it oddly hopeful, mostly because she starts with the founding fathers and worked her way throughout history of just the dynamics between Democrats and Republicans and what the different playbooks have been in the past. And what it really just emphasized for me is that we have been here before in this type of political environment. We have had both parties using the language they're using now before. Like there is nothing new under the sun is basically what this book reinforced. And we have come out of those dark moments in the past and been able to move forward and been able to make progress as a country. And so it really helped give me some hope that we will be able to move forward again. So if you're in the space where you could stand for a little hope and a little infuriation, as always, because reading history can always, for me, tends to be infuriating because just watching the same things replay over and over and over again. But chapters are short, writing is really easy to read, really engaging, it is not dry at all, and I just I do really recommend this if you want more insight into how the heck we got here in the first place. And then the last book, I did save this for last on purpose because I wanted this to be the one we went out on, is The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. Can you even see it? The light is so bright. What do I need to say? This is about dinosaurs, and it's great. If you love dinosaurs, this is the best. I loved this so much. This is, I don't even know what else to tell you about the history of the dinosaurs. This is my favorite dinosaur book I've ever read. It is the easiest to read. It is the most engaging. It is very science-y, but the thing I really loved about it is that Steve Buscemi, the author, he is really excited about dinosaurs, and he really loves dinosaurs, and he wants you to really love dinosaurs too. So he is taking all these really sciencey things and breaking them down to making them very easily consumable and easily understandable, which is like my favorite. My favorite is a scientist who wants to tell people about the thing that they're excited about and will do it in a way that sucks you in. So, like, highly recommend if you're looking for a dinosaur book. I think it's the best of this type of nonfiction. And I mean, would it be ridiculous to reread a nonfiction book about dinosaurs? Maybe. Will I do it? Also, maybe. I could definitely argue myself into rereading this in 2025. All right, everybody, those are my top 10 nonfiction books of 2024. I would love to hear if you have read any of these. I would also love to know what your favorite like subgenre of nonfiction is. Obviously, I have a wide range that I like to consume, but I think, I don't know, I like a real specific history. So like Yale, Girly Drinks, Clever Girl, even though that's not history. Like, I like a nonfiction that is super specific in its subject matter. So that will always suck me in regardless of what it's talking about. But if you want to leave an emoji to let me know you are here, it's a nonfiction emoji. I guess let's do a dinosaur because I talked about 2 dinosaur books in this video. So I guess let's do a dinosaur emoji. And like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to. I hope you all had a lovely new year, and I can't wait to talk to you more about some of the books I've loved in upcoming videos. And as always, thank you for spending your precious time with me. I will talk to you all in the next one. Bye!